Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
All right, good to see you all again in this virtual way. Blessings to those of you who are gathering at Bartlett Street. I haven't been there in some years, in the beautiful temple. So I'm going to talk with you today about the spirit world and about gods and ghosts and demons and animals, and then us strange animals we call humans. And this touches into a few huge Buddhist topics that, of course, we won't entirely unpack today at all, including rebirth and karma and, the nature of time and identity and the emptiness of the self. All of that is tied together here. I will bow respectfully in the direction of each of those enormous doctrines, and mostly speak with us about some hopefully accessible and really ordinary, in a certain way, ways that we might begin to think about our place in the world differently, in the light of how the Buddha and the Buddhist tradition speaks about human existence. And so I want to start off with a question. As many of you will know, in the Buddhist tradition, the long, really infinitely long chain of births before this one that we are in now has us, or what we think of as ourselves, moving through many different kinds of bodies back into the distant past. And this was a core part of the Buddha's awakening experience on the night of his enlightenment. His first investigation, once his practice was complete enough that his mind could do this, he directed his attention to see his past lives, many of them, all the way out to cosmic eons of past lives. And what he saw, he described as, I saw my past lives, or births, or homes. Those are all words for the same thing here. Where I was born, what was my clan, my caste, my name, my occupation, what I ate, what kind of food I ate, what was my experience of pleasure and pain, how I died, and where I went next. And so, whatever you make of this, all of us are alive in a time when the most victorious world religion, I'll call it, at the moment, is secular humanism, that places humans at the center of the cosmos and everyone else as less important. And this humanism has a very strong materialistic or scientific materialistic component. And so whatever your personal beliefs, you live in a culture, most likely, unless you primarily live in an extant indigenous culture or an animist culture, you probably live in a culture that thinks of anything that can't be measured in a material way is imaginary or mythical or fictional, or in some way, a remnant of an ancient superstitious world. So we all live in that right now. But I want to start us off by asking you to ignore that for a moment and pretend. And pretend here can mean know deeply in your heart, or imagine just as an image, or think mythically or archetypally. You can do this in whatever channel works for you to not have too much resistance. But I would like you to connect with the possibility that you've had an infinite series of past lives, and that some of them have been very pleasurable and some of them very painful. Because if we look around the world, that's kind of what it looks like, right? Some lifetimes have a lot of pleasure, some have a lot of pain. They all have a mix of those, of course. And I would like you to take a moment. This is like a tiny meditation, like 30 seconds. Turn toward your heart memory of time, of all the vast time on this earth and in the universe that you have been here. And bring to mind one past lifetime that was good, that was really good, where there was blessing, where there was well-being, where there was some kind of access to pleasure or joy or wisdom. See what comes, and just trust whatever image or idea comes without too much thinking. Bring to mind a past life that was really good. And as you get that image, just think for a moment about who that being is. And I want to do both. I want to do a mini like popcorn go around, and we'll use, for folks on Zoom, we'll use the chat for this, and for folks in the room, I'll ask you to just one at a time speak out loud if you want, only if you want to, what you came up with. And so just one or two words, like, who is that being? What is that? So folks on Zoom, if you would like to, drop in the chat. What appeared for you? What was one of your blessed past lives? And for folks in the room, let's hear a few. What came?
Farmer.
Mother.
In one of my past lives, I felt helpful and loved.
Mm-hmm. I heard farmer, mother, helpful and loved. Go ahead.
Online, there's a monk in a French monastery.
Yep. I think I was there with you, man. What else?
A deer.
Deer.
Something like a bishop leading a congregation. A bear, a seagull soaring over the bay. Bunny by a brook. Teacher, a small child.
Mm-hmm.
Martial Germanic peasant.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Lover and protector.
Yeah.
20s musician.
Nice. I think I was there with you too. Haha. They're good. And actually, as we hear these, notice which ones resonate for you, because there might be ones where you're like, yeah, you know? Any others you want to drop in, folks in the room or in the virtual room?
Middle Eastern belly dancer.
Yep, I have no doubt.
You can't see him very good, can you?
Sweet. What was that?
Beloved patriarch.
Yeah, good. All right, sweet. So thank you for sharing some of your past with us. I believe all of them because I don't think the world works in as linear a way as we think it does in the modern scientific materialist world. Before the scientific revolution, and which included an emphasis on materialism and rationality, born as a reaction against the irrational excesses, mostly of the Catholic Church in Europe. Like, that's a very particular, reactive movement. But that movement, because it has been tied to technological power and has, given humans the ability to really change our material existence, to feed more people, to make more medicines, to build stronger houses. All of that's great, to a certain extent, all of that technological progress, but it has come with a worldview. And the worldview it came with is that only things that we can measure and prove with our machines are valid. But before that reactive movement that led to all this gorgeous technology that we're using in this very moment, living through all day, before that, and outside of that very specific European movement, nearly every culture in the world, for as long as we can remember, in every body of literature, in every body of knowledge, has taken as a point of fact and understanding that the world includes kinds of aliveness that are much more diverse than the human realm, and that animals have a sentience and an intelligence and an aliveness, and that plants have a sentience and intelligence and an aliveness, and that natural phenomena like rain and clouds and sun and the earth, have a kind of sentience and aliveness. If you have the tendency to say herself instead of itself for the earth, you are remembering some of this ancient knowledge. If you have the impulse when you're walking in the woods to stop in front of one of those great ancient trees, the huge redwoods or the vast sequoias, or an old juniper in the desert that's way older than you are, if you have the impulse to stop by one of those trees and get quiet and talk to it a little bit, or even to just bow or offer any kind of respect, you are remembering this kind of knowledge. And so in the Buddhist world, this is a given in the teachings of the Buddha, that the world is alive. The Buddha's discourses recorded in the Pali Canon, in the earliest body of texts, they record the Buddha teaching lots of kinds of humans, poor people, rich people, people from similar traditions, other traditions, people who didn't agree with him at all philosophically, kings and ministers, and people of all genders and ages. But they also record him teaching deities. Many, many discourses begin with a passage that goes something like, the Buddha was living with his monastics in the great monastery of Jeta's Grove, Anathapindika's Park. This is one of the great monasteries he lived in for many years. And there, deep in the middle of the night, as the Buddha sat with his monastics in the hall, teaching Dhamma, a deity, a deva, a divine being, luminous and whose beauty lit up the entirety of the wood, appeared and came up to the Buddha and bowed and stood to one side and asked a question. So, and the Buddha interacts with these deities frequently, like lots in the texts. And at different times, the Buddha or his powerful disciples will go to a realm in the heaven realms to converse with the powerful deities that we could call gods. Saka, the king of the gods, who is a Buddhist version of the Vedic god Indra. It's a divine being called the Brahma Sahampati that first persuades the Buddha to teach. Right after the Buddha's enlightenment, the Buddha thinks the Dhamma I have discovered is too subtle, too difficult. No one will understand it. And Brahma Sahampati, who lives in one of the more nearby heaven realms where they can interact with people, hears the Buddha thinking this, overhears the Buddha thinking, and appears in front of the Buddha and bows and says, "Blessed One, your teachings will be of great fruit to many. You should look around the world with the powerful vision that you've developed, and you'll see that there are beings with little dust in their eyes who would hear these teachings and benefit, and so you should teach." And the Buddha does so, and he looks around, he realizes that Brahma Sahampati is right. He agrees to teach, and then Brahma Sahampati says, "My work here is done," and bows and then disappears and goes back to his heaven realm. The Buddha doesn't only interact with beautiful, generous, kind, wise, divine beings, but he also interacts with beings who are part of the God realm, but are troubled gods, sometimes called jealous gods, or titans is an old translation of the word asura. These are gods that folks that are very powerful, but their defilements are also strong. So you might know some people like this, or at least you might use their software, or vote against them in elections, things like that. These are very powerful beings who are somewhat deluded and cause harm. One of the most famous of these is the being called Mara the deceiver, who we personify as a form of inner doubt, as a kind of psychological demon. But in the texts, Mara is a being. Mara is a great king who rules over the world of delusion. And when the Buddha is about to become awakened and liberated, the thing Mara says to the Buddha, Mara shows up, and they have this great battle. Mara sends his gorgeous, sexy daughters, and you can put them into whatever sexual preference you like. Mara sends his super sexy kids to seduce the Buddha, and but their names are lust, desire, and confusion, right? And the Buddha doesn't budge. And then Mara sends armies of fear and anger and demons throwing spears. But eventually, when Mara and the Buddha talk directly, what Mara says is, if you become awakened, you depart my realm. You are no longer my subject. I'm the king of this realm. You have no right to leave it. So the psychology here is clear, but in the texts, it's a being. And it's interesting, I think, sometimes to not immediately go to the thing that we are trained to do under scientific materialism, which is to think of everything non-modern as only psychological metaphor. We can take it as psychological metaphor, and I think that's helpful. Mara shows up as self-doubt. Whenever I'm practicing and I think like, oh, I just can't do this, I'm not good enough, that's Mara. But what if your mind could get so quiet that you could actually look over into the doorway of your room, and there he would be, standing there, the demon king in his great robes, saying, "You will not leave my realm." Right? And it's a different way to think about kind of that same thing, right? You could think of it as a psychology, and you could think of it as there's a being standing in my doorway. So there's a few other realms. There's 6 realms that I'm pointing to, and some of you will know this teaching. And for some, this might be more new. It's not taught on as much in the modern, Dharma world because it feels non-modern, right? It clashes with some of our modern beliefs. There are besides the God realm and the human realm and the Titan or the jealous God realm, there are 3 realms that are categorically considered unfortunate. And these are the realms of the hells, the ghosts, and the animals. They're each characterized by certain kinds of states, essentially. States of mind, states of heart. The hell realms are characterized by states of profound fear and anger and rage and hatred. The ghost realms are characterized by states of profound hunger and need and want. And the animal realms are characterized by dullness and repetitiveness. And it's important, I think, to particularly for the animal realm here, to be clear-eyed about what we're saying when we mean animal. It's part of modern orthodoxy that we humans are animals, right? We share qualities that many of the animals do. In a certain way, there's a spectrum of what we could call animal that goes, all the way from, paramecia and amoebas, extremely simple mobile organisms, all the way up through, like complex reptiles, that have a certain kind of brain structure, complex mammals that have a different, more complex brain structure. And in the realm of mammals, it's a bit of a gray area where the borderline is, right? Especially if you take into account the ideas that evolution has brought forward. There are great apes that can learn language. There are dolphins that can learn language. There are some humans that can't learn language very well. There are some dogs who have been our longest animal companions. It's likely that humans and dogs would never have evolved to what we are now without companionship of each other. So they were the first domesticated animal, our most ancient friend in the animal world. The dog people, there are all sorts of dogs that are kinder, more generous, more compassionate, and more empathic than lots of humans. And I'm sure you know this. You probably know some of them. You might have one of them sitting on your lap right now, And so there's not I don't think that we need to take this doctrine of the 6 realms as saying that there's a categorical boundary between these kinds of beings. That would be a materialistic view. But there's a way of saying that this is a spectrum of kinds of births. The ghost realm is a particularly powerful and interesting image from these texts. And it proposes that there's a realm of beings who for various reasons, for various conditions, have been born in a situation of profound and unmanageable and unresolvable need. So needy, they need so much, and they can never be satisfied. The mythical image of these beings, or the vision image from the visionary folks who wrote these down, and if you take it as the texts say, it's powerful beings, monastics, who would go to the realm of the ghosts and see them. One of the descriptions is beings in states of profound suffering, terrible, painful bodies, their limbs all bent. Very often they're hugely fat, kind of malnutrition sort of fat, malnourished kind of fat, with pinhole mouths. They can't take in nourishment. So it's a powerful and frightening psychological image of someone who is just all hunger and pain, and that can't be satisfied. And the Buddhist stories about these get very, very graphic. And they're always tied to So the stories of all the realms are tied to karma. And the idea is that our actions give rise to our future. And so some of these, at a certain point became teaching stories. There's whole chapters both in the Pali Canon texts and in the later Buddhist stories, the Sanskrit Buddhist stories, that talk, for instance, about the ghost realms or the hell realms, and monks will, or the Buddha will go to these realms, or one of those creatures will come to speak with a monk, and the monk will often ask, "How did you get here? What did you do to be born here?" And very, very often the being will say, essentially, go ask the Buddha. The phrase they use is, "When the sun has risen, there's no need for a lamp." Meaning, why should I tell you? Go ask the Buddha who knows and sees. He'll tell you. And the Buddha would say, "Oh, here's the story of how this being got to this state." And for the ghosts, for instance, the stories are all essentially about a quality that gets translated as meanness. There's a kind of meanness that's both cruelty and stinginess kind of mixed together. The way that the English word mean can mean both of those things, right? Mean is like cruel, and mean is like graspy, clingy and graspy. And so the Buddha will tell a story, or the ghost will tell a story of how in some past birth they fell into mind states of profound constrictedness, kind of fearful hatred, and based on that they were born as a ghost. One of the really interesting teachings on the ghost realm that starts to arise is that the ghost realm is where our troubled ancestors live. So our own ancestors, our ancestors of blood, our ancestors of spirit, they live in these various realms. And this was one of the things that was really a given in cultures all around the world, around rebirth and other realms, is where are our ancestors? When I honor my ancestors, recent ones, grandparents that have passed, great-grandparents, and then distant ones, the people that form my line, my Puerto Rican ancestors, my English ancestors. When I reach back into those lines, if I reach back into, through the Puerto Rican colony back to Spain, and I don't know who those people were, right? But I can feel back into it. And then I could feel, where are they? Where are they now? Because if we really take the Buddhist proposal seriously, even as a kind of mythic description of how the world works, we still get, even if we don't need to take on that past lives are a concrete, literal, like, I go from this body to another body. Maybe that's true. But again, that's trying to fit into the scientific materialist framework. If I don't try to do that, what I get is a mystery about how in my being right now, there is the infinite past. Every word I say, I didn't invent, right? I'm carrying the legacy of ancestral knowledge through these words. Even my thoughts, hardly any of them are unique, right? They're all a coming together of all the conditions of the cultures that I've grown up in. And where did that come from? That came from ancestral lineage. And everything that we do, and the way that we sit, and what we wear, and what we eat, all those things the Buddha described, that's a way of describing identity and ancestry. How did I get here? This is not my beautiful house. This is not my beautiful wife. How did I get here? Right? And so when we touch into this, what we can feel then is a couple things that are important for us, I think, to bring into our practice. One is that the core Buddhist teaching that everything is connected. And the way that things are connected is that actions have effects. This is the teaching on karma. action always has an effect. A terrible, mean, cruel action that's gonna be really bad for you. If you are a terrible, mean, cruel acting person, that's not gonna be a good in the future. And maybe for a little while you do okay, right? Maybe for a little while you're like, yeah, I own the company, I shoot the rocket ships, I have the biggest stuff, like I'm the dude, right? Not naming names. But you know, it's part of every culture, again, everywhere in the world that I know of, that folks like that, they get theirs, right? It comes around. It always comes around. It has to. It has to. Because the weave of the universe, the thing the Buddha discovers in his awakening moment is that the weave of the universe is moral. That the thing that causes things to go one way or the other is the goodness of actions or the badness of actions. And so, you cause harm, it comes back, right? You cause well-being, it comes back. And so the first, I think, deep shift that this perspective can make for us, this is really, if you remember the Eightfold Path, this is a shift in the direction of what's called right view, the first limb, is to endeavor to always remember that our actions matter. That every single action matters. So from the microscopic, a shift in tone of voice when talking to someone, right? A little body language where something that I'm still kind of working out and I'm upset about leaks out onto someone else as a little bit of toxicity or unclarity. That has an effect. I mean, it has an effect, right? When you're interacting with someone, you get so many messages, right? You get so much information. What are we getting there? We're getting the effects of the past coming through in the present. When you walk into a space and you can feel that the space carries the charge of an ancient bias, whether that's homophobia or racism or sexism or whatever, when you walk into a room and and you just know that you're not wealthy enough to really belong in that room, right? Or you're not straight enough or pretty enough or young enough or strong enough or whatever, right? Because that's the culture carries these karmas from the past. When we talk about generational trauma, systemic trauma, what we're talking about is karma. We're saying these things exist in the collective and it's hard to get free of them as individuals. So you have to figure out how to work around them. You come together in safer spaces, you become resilient. Resilience just means you've figured out how to get by in a world that sucks sometimes. And so the first way forward here is to get that our actions always matter, right? That everything comes back. And that means that there's a kind of inner accountability. And this becomes, as we practice it, a kind of inner nobility or dignity. Right? This is why the precepts are the foundation of the practice. Because if you ground yourselves in ethical action or moral action or righteousness or rightness, righteous is a dangerous word, but rightness, acting right in the world, then that gives rise to an incredible strength. Because you become what the texts call blameless. You understand that sometimes things go your way and sometimes they don't, but you've acted with clarity and you've set up a better future for yourself and those you're caring for by doing good. The second thing I want us to take from this model of all the realms is that the world is alive. In the Buddhist sense of the world, here we are humans walking around, But in past lives, we've also been animals. Many past lives of the Buddha, he was an animal. So humans and animals, not such a clear dividing line there. And I'm not going to turn this into a sermon on being vegetarian, but we might say that the relationship between humans and animals is interconnected in lots of ways. And just to take that into account. How does it change our relationship to animals if we think of ourselves as being them, or our ancestors as being them? That actually we've been them many times, they've been us many times. The ghost realm is interesting because it's not a different place. It's not like a heaven realm or a hell realm, which are sort of somewhere else because they're really immaterial. The ghost realm is here. And in the ghost stories, in the Buddhist ghost stories, the ghosts are present among us. And it just takes a certain kind of vision to be able to see them. And the vision that it takes to see them is compassion for them. If you don't care about them, you don't see them. If you care about them, you start to see them. And, any of us who live in the big cities now, I think you know what this means. That there's beings visible in the city who are characterized, whose state is characterized by consuming hunger, right? So much deprivation and trauma. And that they haunt the streets sometimes. And it's very hard to help them. Many good people are trying, right? So blessings to all those who give energy to help those who need so much and are so wounded. That's not a way of saying that they are ghosts. That would dehumanize in a certain way. They're people. But it's a way of saying that these lines are blurry, actually. Because if ghosts are our unhealthy ancestors, and who got there through unfortunate circumstances, the way to help them is to give them blessing. And this is where sending merit came from. I dedicate the merit. You can dedicate the merit of your practice to beings in the ghost realm, specific ones, or even in the abstract to your ancestors who might be unwell. You could say, may the merit or the blessing that arises as a result of this practice, may it go to serve those beings in unfortunate realms. May they be born in a better place. And beings can then immediately die out of the ghost realm and be reborn, either in a heaven realm or a human realm, somewhere better. Maybe this is what happens when someone gets rescued out of a dire, deeply traumatized situation and brought to a safe house, a safe place, a nourishing place, and been given what they need to heal a bit, to recover. Maybe that is dying out of the ghost realm and being reborn in a better realm. Because the realms are both images and proposals that everything is part of us and alive. There are specific beings in the Buddhist world that live in old trees, that live in fragrant plants, beautiful flowers. There are beings that get translated as fairies and goblins. Those are just the European words that we have in English. But beings that make their home in fragrant bushes. So next time it's a spring night and you're walking through one of those neighborhoods in the city or the East Bay where the jasmine is blooming. Maybe you do the beautiful thing where you stop and you smell the jasmine, and that's stunning. One of my most delicious smells I've ever encountered in my life, the night blooming jasmine in the Bay Area. But maybe you also stop and you say hello to the beings of the jasmine, right? To the fairies of the jasmine. And what would it change in our life for us to do this? To get that everything around us is alive, which doesn't mean just has the biological characteristics of life, like we know that trees and grasses do, but has a certain kind of sentience, a certain kind of identity or knowing. think what this does in part is it suggests to us, it's both that the world is alive and that our actions matter. And the last piece here is that we are those beings, right? If you take up this idea of rebirth, however you take it up, whether it's mythical or psychological or material, ancestral, cultural, there's a way that things that don't feel like myself in this moment, right? That tree, that rabbit, that priest, that person on the street, that, child, that teacher. That I have been those. I have been in those roles in the past. Part of where this goes, the Buddhists were really good mathematicians. They were like, if the past goes back infinitely, and we've all been born in all these different ways, that must mean that everyone alive has been everyone else's lives, mother, father, child, lover, enemy, friend, at some point in the past, right? They got that thing about how infinity works. And so in the stories, it's so sweet. The Buddha will tell a story about his past life. Say, oh, there was a king, and there was a wicked minister, and there was a farmer, and there was this thing, and then there was a wise person. And at the end of the story, he says, in that story, I was the wise person, and Ananda was the farmer, and Devadatta, which is his cousin, who's one of the bad guys in the stories, was the wicked minister, and Sariputta was the king, and what you get is a story that the Buddha and his friends, these monks and nuns who he was hanging out with, that they've actually been hanging out together for a very long time, right? The stories about the Buddha and his wife, who gets a bit of a bad rap in the stories, which is to say she's not given hardly any words to speak at all in the story. The Buddha's story fails the Bechdel test for movies, feminist test, but if you dig into the myths about them, it actually says that the Buddha and her, Gautama and Yasodhara, have been together for eons. In many, many former lives, they were married, they were friends, they were gods together. They were each other's parents. The idea is that anyone we're connected with now, that connection also has karmic roots, right? So, all of us sitting here, all of us people, the person who said a bishop leading a congregation, and the person who said a monk in a French monastery. What if I said, yes, in that monastery, Tom was the bishop, and all the rest of us were the monks. That was good times, right? And then the plague came, and we all died, and we were reborn somewhere else, and that's how it works. And so these three pieces, I think, just to take forward and allow to spin in the heart, right? Our actions always matter, right? Actions determine the future. That's all that determines the future, right? All the other things are conditions that are around based on old momentum. You can't do anything about that. All you have is your actions. So respect them, don't waste them. The second is that everything is alive, and begin to shift our sense of how we relate to the living world around us as a kind of kinship. And then the third is that the kinship is not just between my solid, separate human being, I'm human, and my friends, the trees, my friends, the rabbits, but actually that I am all of those things because of how the infinite, weave of time and the flow of consciousness goes. So we're all related, we're all interwoven, we're all siblings. We are all, in a certain way, just a fractal of each other in the great aliveness. And within that strange, scintillating universe, then all we have is our perception of, pleasure and pain, relationship, energy. And then what do you do with that? What do you do next? How do you act skillfully in the next moment in a world where everything is alive and all your actions matter? What's the best thing you can do in this next moment? All right, so we'll pause there. Thank you for listening to a talk that went a little cosmic and hopefully looped a little back. A couple of minutes for questions or reflections here.
Yep. Clint, let me get the mic to you. I'll just sit on the floor. It's okay.
What's that?
I'll sit it here so it doesn't make any noise. Go ahead.
Oh, okay, great. Well, this is a subject that I find intensely interesting, and I've had discussions about it with others, Buddhists and non-Buddhists. And the question about reincarnation is one idea that's been forth, is that each new life we have, we get to review what we got wrong and what we got right in the previous life. And if we lived a virtuous, rather enlightened life, we go on to the next level of knowledge and growth and compassion. And if we act in ways that were not helpful or skillful, we have the opportunity in the next life to continue to, those problems will come up again, and we'll be confronted with those problems. And maybe in the next lifetime, we'll learn something and not repeat what we did in the past. So that's one view I've heard. Another view is kind of like, okay, one day, one life I'm a prince, another life I'm a beggar with leprosy, and then it's just kind of like just a lottery, and without any sense of causation. Well, I mean, proper karma, but without any just round and round and round. Where sometimes it's happy, sometimes it's not happy. Again, here's your views on those 2 points.
From the Buddhist perspective, the first one is right view and the second one is wrong view. From the Buddhist perspective, it's absolutely the case that we are given the opportunity to continue practicing, continue learning, and that the states and bodies and lives we're born into very much flow from our previous actions. They also flow from previous conditions that aren't our personal actions, right? So I'm partly here because, my Spanish ancestors invaded the New World. I didn't do that, but ancestrally, my people did that. So, I have some of that karma to bear and some of it not. And that's mine to figure out, but it's very much the case that we are continually learning and growing, right? And if that were not the case, awakening wouldn't be possible, right? If it was just a lottery where you just fell in, that would mean that actions don't matter, that causation doesn't matter, and that liberation is impossible. There were people in the Buddha's lifetime that had that view, and the Buddha categorically rejected that view, that it was random. And so the encouragement here, and I think this is an encouragement that fights against the kind of secular materialist viewpoint that's common right now. In a certain way, it would be easier to think of it as random. It's less mystical in that way. But actually, if it were random, the whole system wouldn't make sense. So the path only makes sense if you can actually grow in it. And that means within a lifetime, but also from lifetime to lifetime.
Thank you.
Yeah. Tom, Bishop Tom.
Oh, just a second. I have to let everyone unmute.
Right on.
Okay, Tom, you should be able to unmute now.
Yes, thank you. I know our time is short, Sean, so maybe if you can stay longer online to answer this, but I find it very interesting that some of the laws being passed by various states, like don't do anything in the classroom that makes somebody feel anxious or guilty or, sort of flies in the face of this idea that there is generational trauma, that there is, this ripple effect across lifetimes.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, that's just my statement, but you probably have something to say about that, I would think.
I think it's true. I think it's true. Without getting too, much into a political analysis of those laws, I think it's from the Buddhist perspective. It just makes sense to me that like terrible actions done in the deep past are still having an effect now. That seems obvious. And some people alive now, all the people alive now have different kinds of connections to those terrible actions that happened in the past. And based on our different kinds of connections to those, we have a different relationship to them. And and exactly what that relationship is and exactly what our responsibility is a really complex socio-political conversation, but the philosophically, I think, on the Buddhist front, one of the reasons that compassion comes forward as the preeminent Buddhist, positive emotion, is that if you really take all this in, this idea of infinite like return and interconnectedness, there to reject, to reject being in relationship to ancient traumas, it would be a kind of meanness, because you would have to deny the reality of interconnection, and you don't have to go all the way to say, because of that, I know that it means that, people of this color should do these things, or people of this wealth should do these things. That's super complicated. People come from all sorts of places. It's worth trying to figure out, reparations. But mostly I think of those laws as being, they have a tiny piece of mean philosophy in them, but mostly they're political and about power. And so, yeah. So that's a bit of a tangential bow to a complicated politics, but fundamentally, I do agree with you. So I'm going to say my commercial here, and then we'll wrap for the moment, and then I'll stick around for a few minutes if there's a couple more questions. My commercial is that this talk is sort of a teaser for the next of my 5-week sutta study classes that I do with Spirit Rock. We read discourses from the Pali Canon and talk about their relevance in contemporary life. The next one is they're on Thursday afternoons, 1 to 3 Pacific time. And the next one starts March 9th, 5 Thursdays starting March 9th. And it's on this topic of, we're going to look at cosmology, multiple realms, rebirth, the heavens and hells and ghosts. And we'll read texts where the Buddha is interacting with all these beings and laying out the doctrines of interdependence and how we might think about, essentially, this is the world in a kind of Buddhist animist sort of framework. So come read the Pali Canon with me if you like that sort of thing. And I look forward to that. And my weekly group is on Tuesday nights online, and you can find that. So I'll close with, I'll let you do your regular merit blessing, but I'll just add that if the blessings of our practice could bless beings related to us in the realms of profound need, in the ghost realms, may their hearts be cheered, and may they be uplifted to more blessed states of existence. All right. Thank you. Yeah, I'll stick around if there's any extra questions.
Yes, Sean. This is John.
Hey, John.
the French monk. When you describe the ghost realm, of course, I thought of addiction and how one moment kind of use of a substance can flip the switch, and kind of, well, I think of it as more being surrounded by hungry ghosts. And but in some ways, addiction and the state of intoxication is a ghost-like consciousness, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know if, yeah.
Yeah. I think it's a beautiful, it's an appropriate metaphor. Addiction in a way is an appropriate metaphor for grasping in all of its forms, toward any kind of state. But in its really terrible manifestations, it really feels ghosty. It does. And one of the mysteries in the stories about, the ghost realms is that beings in the ghost realms, it's very difficult for them to do wholesome action themselves, right? And so the thing that gets you born in a better realm is your own wholesome actions. But when you're in terrible states, either ghost realm states or, hell realm kind of states, it's very difficult to have a moment of appreciation or gratitude or generosity or something that could land you in a better realm. Likewise, in the animal states, if your life is just so repetitive in a certain way, one of my teachers once, Christopher Titmus, we were on retreat in India, lots of mosquitoes there, and he was giving a talk and he was mentioning rebirths, and he very dryly at one point said in his upper class British accent, he said, 10,000 lifetimes as a mosquito. It's like, once you get into that kind of cycle, it's hard to get out, And so it's that way with the ghost realms. The thing that can happen with the ghost realms is that someone in a more fortunate state like us can see a being in the ghost realm and can wish them well, can dedicate merit to them, can do something. In the texts, it's always like the human, arranges a big donation event, like makes donations to the monks and nuns, and then dedicates the merit of that gift to the ghosts. The ghosts see that it has happened, and they feel mudita. So they didn't do the wholesome thing, but they appreciate that the wholesome thing was done. And so there is a way that doing something wholesome on behalf of a ghost, the ghost has to notice. And so there's a way that, like with folks in addiction cycles, you have to sort of get a wedge in there for a moment so that they notice the outside world, right? They're not consumed by the hunger for a moment, and they can appreciate that someone else is doing something good. But that state, that moment of mudita, appreciative joy, it's a Brahma Vihara, that moment is enough for them to die from that unfortunate state and be reborn in a more fortunate state. And so I think, working with addiction, either in ourselves or others, that this is a beautiful, metaphor for those kinds of mind states and what it takes to actually interrupt them and turn the ship a little bit.
Sean,
Thanks.
do you have thoughts about synchronicity as an active force in a person's life?
Synchronicity is an active force, like when you notice.
Oh, I notice it often.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm hearing a bunch of other talking. Maybe that's it, right? Hang on a second, I'm going to mute the space. Okay. Thank you. I think from a Buddhist perspective, synchronicity isn't random, like things happen for reasons. But one of the ways the Buddha described karma is that, there's momentum from the past, and there's present states and present actions. Because everything is connected, the momentum from the past mixed with present intentions and actions is so complex that it's not possible to actually figure out. So you can't make a linear connection between like this is happening because that happened. That's too simplistic. And so things like synchronicities feel to me from this Buddhist lens like this is what's happening. It is happening for reasons. I can make meaning out of it. It might be intrinsically meaningful or less meaningful. I could make meaning out of it, which is great. It's no problem, right? Everything is empty, so you making meaning is as good as meaning arising by itself from some other means. But still, the thing that matters is the state of our own heart. So like when something happens, one of the things about something like synchronicities, any moment really where we get kind of woken up out of the trance of ordinary deluded mind, I wake up and I notice something. I say, oh, look, this is happening, I think of moments like that really as like a mindfulness bell, to be like, oh, look, this is happening. And now what? Am I then inspired? Am I then confused? Am I then curious? Like what happens in my mind once I notice something like that? And in a certain way, that's the only thing that matters. Like whatever it means, who knows what it means? But it has an effect. Right? Everything we notice has an effect on us. So when you notice something like that, what does it do? And I think for some people, things like that have the effect of suggesting to us, this goes back to the random births question. Things like that, I think for some folks can have the effect of suggesting to us that the world is not as random as we think. And I think that's a helpful reflection, right? That if we think that just random shit is happening all the time, that might for us start to slide into that kind of nihilism of like, well, then my actions don't really matter. It doesn't really matter what I watch tonight or what I eat or who I go out with or whatever, but it matters, And so the cosmos is, this is hard for folks who grew up in, I grew up Catholic, like who grew up in theistic systems or in the scientific system. For the Buddha to say, the cosmos is not being externally directed by a God, neither is it random. Right? In the European view, those are the only two options. The Buddhist option is different. There's no controller God, but it's not random. It functions like an ecosystem. Nobody manages the forest, but it's all connected and it functions. And so the mushroom here connects to the tree here, which has salmon DNA way up in its branches because a bear ate and pooped and the tree grew, and it's all right there doing its thing. You don't need intelligent design for that. It doesn't have to have been designed that way. It's actually how ecosystems work. So then the synchronicity, I think, is a window into how this is what happens in an interconnected ecosystem, is that sometimes things just line up. And what I would want us to take forward from that is, is again back to how do we then act if we really grok that the universe is a connected system.
By the way, I won't say you asked for a fractal, but while they're listening to you, here's your fractal.
Awesome. Those are when I was in grad school, like those are the best kind of notes. Sometimes I would be like, oh, I'm writing down things the professor said, and other times I'm writing swirls that nest into other swirls, and that's how my mind is going to work in this time. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Of course.